So I need to apologize once again. I still have this nasty cough. It looks much worse than it is. I feel well, Baruch Hashem. I have no fever, but I have this persistent cough. I very much hope b'schus harabim it'll pass very soon. But I know it doesn't look good, doesn't sound good. It is what it is, and we need to keep on teaching Torah. So my apologies. This week, Parshat Shlach. And one of the most important mitzvahs in Torah is mitzvahs tzitzis. There are very few mitzvahs. A handful of mitzvahs upon which Chazal say, Shkula mitzvahs tzitzis keneged kol ha-mitzvahs sheb'Torah. So in Menachos Mem Aleph Amud Aleph, we find an interesting Gemara, very uncommon. Omalei malocha l'Rav Katina, a malach, an angel from above, revealed a secret to Rav Katina, one of the Ameroim. Be'idne deritcha, in a moment of wrath, we are nenash al bitul mitzvahs aseh. And that is why one should always wear tzitzis. If you don't wear a garment of dalat kanfis, you're not chayav in tzitzis. But be'idna deritcha, you will be punished for not wearing tzitzis. Tosfos explains, the chiddush is, even though you're not over avera, you have no avera, because if you don't have dalat kanfis, you're not mechuyev in tzitzis. You don't have the mitzvah. Nevertheless, be'idna deritcha, in a moment of anger, which we don't really understand what it is. But Bashamayim, there is a moment of midas adin. Idne derischa, you're nanesh, you're punished for not wearing tzitzis. But Tosfos says, miltzah de pshita, if you're mevatel mitzvah say and you do an avera, you're always punished. What is unique about idne deritcha is you're not wearing dalat kanfis, so you don't really have any avera. But nevertheless, you're losing out the mitzvah. And be'idne deritcha, you will be punished. Tosfos twice in Shas. Shabbos Lamed Amud Beis, Erech and Beis Amud Beis, Tosfos explains. Only mitzvahs tzitzis. Because in their day and age, everyone wore tzitzis. And if you are an exception, that seems to be a zilzul in mitzvahs. Everyone wears tzitzis, why don't you? And that is why we're nanesh. But Tosfos says, if it wouldn't be that everyone is and you are not, then even be'idne deritcha there would be no oynish. That's Shabbos and Erechin. It coincides with the Tosfos of Menachos Mem Aleph. Tosfos says, if you don't wear dalat kanfis, you don't really have an avera, and that is why you're only punished be'idne deritcha. Rabbi Kiva Eiger, Hagos, in Gilin Hashas, in Menachos, notes, Ayin Tosfos Psachim Kuf Yud Gimel. What's in Psachim Kuf Yud Gimel? The Gemara says, Shivo Menudin L'Shamayim. 7 people are in Nidui, in Chayrim. One of them is Mishayin Tefillin, another is Mishayin Tzitzis. Tosfos explains, why would a person be Menuda L'Shamayim for the fact that he's not wearing tzitzis? He's not mechuyev to wear tzitzis. Tosfos says, Yeshloi bebeisoi ve'enoi manichon. He has tefillin, he doesn't put them on. He has tzitzis, he doesn't put it on. And that is why he's menuda l'shamayim. Inami, in other derech, another interpretation, even if he doesn't have, he should make an effort to have. Moshe Rabbeinu made an effort l'konas li'eretz Yisrael, l'kayem mitzvoseu. So the Gemara says in Sot Yudaled, Moshe Rabbeinu so much wanted to come into Eretz Yisrael. Why? Kedei lekayem mitzvoteya. You're expected to make an effort to achieve tzitzis, to achieve tefillin, and if you don't do so, menuda l'shamayim. So according to one teretz and Tosfos, you are expected to make this effort to be mekayem tzitzis and tefillin. What is the pele l'cha'oira? How does Tosfos compare tzitzis to tefillin? Tzitzis, as long as you're not wearing dalat kanfis, you don't have a chiyuv. But a person is chayiv l'aniach tefillin. And in Tosfos, as well in the Gemara, seems to be that tefillin and tzitzis are the same. 2 different interpretations. I wrote a lengthy siman, Minchas Osher HaTorah Pashas Boy, once again Minchas Osher Mesechet Psochim, and I argued, at least in the opinion of the Rambam, and Toises and Nechun of Kuf Yud, Mitzvahs Tefillin is Lamala Min Azman. Lo kedivrei Kesav Mishnah Perekem Yesod HaTorah, lo kedivrei Alavush Siman Lamed Zayin, lo kedivrei Mishnah Berurah Lamed Zayin, Shulchan Aruch HaChaim. I argue, B'shittas Kama Rishonim, I don't say it halacha l'maisa. Mitzvahs Tefillin doesn't coincide with a day. It's not one of the mitzvahs of Seder Hayom. It's Lamala Min Azman. Mitzvah Chaviva. Do your best to be Mekayim mitzvahs. Chacham leiv yikach mitzvahs. Moshe Rabbeinu did his utmost to come into Eretz Yisrael to be Mekayim mitzvahs seyom. But it's not an aveira. The reason we need to put on tefillin every day is because this is a lengthy discussion I don't want to get into today. I'm just touching upon the point. Tosfos compares tzitzis to tefillin, and l'chayra, they're not the same. So this very principle, be'idne daritcha, we are punished if a person doesn't put on dalat kanfis, kedei lehischayev b'tzitzis. Is this unique to tzitzis, or does it apply across the board to all the other mitzvahs that are similar to tzitzis? Not a bitul mitzvah say. If somebody doesn't eat matzahs, mavatal mitzvah say that's an aveira. You're not noit lulav is an aveira. You're not sitting in the sukkah, it's an aveira. You're not mekayim shiluach heken, it's an aveira. Tosfos explains when the Gemara says be'idne daritcha, it is when you don't have an aveira, because if you don't wear dalat kanfis, you don't have mitzvah tzitzis. But is this unique to tzitzis? There's room to argue, yes, it's just by tzitzis, because Kos of Rambam, Perigimel, Halacha Yud Aleph mitzvah tzitzis, Afal Pi, She'einu dem Chai b'tzitzis K'she'einu dalat kanfis. But a person is supposed to make an effort, because tzitzis comes to remind you of Tariag mitzvah shebetoiro. Shkura mitzvah tzitzis keneged Tariag mitzvahs. And the Tur writes the same in Simach of Daled. And the Shulchan Aruch writes the same, Sif Aleph Simach of Daled. So the Rambam, Tur, and the Shulchan Aruch all put tzitzis aside. It is a geder b'fnei atzmoi, because of the centrality and importance of mitzvah tzitzis that comes to remind us of all the Tariag mitzvahs. So maybe it is only regarding tzitzis that we say be'idne daritcha anshinan. So the Magen Avraham Simaches Siv Beis in Ilchas Tzitzis tries to explain, why do we need to stand when we say Berachas HaTzitzis and we don't need to stand by the Broch HaNafroshas Chala Tumas HaMaisis? The Magen Avraham says, because Tumas HaMaisis you're not mechuyev on if you want to eat. But tzitzis is a chiyuv. Why would tzitzis be different than Froshes Tumas HaMaisis? As long as you don't want to eat Peretz HaSol, you don't have a mitzvah of Frosha. As long as you don't want to eat meat, you don't have a mitzvah of Shchita. As long as you're not wearing dalat kanfis, you don't have a mitzvah of tzitzis. Shuvas Maram Shikur der Kof Chov Gimel says, tzitzis is different. Because tzitzis is important, to remember all the mitzvahs. Ein zenereli. That is just a midas chasidus. It's not a chiyuv. It's very unreasonable that the dinam of brachas ba'amida or b'yeshiva is dependent on a midas chasidus. I need to point out there are many different drochim dealing with the same question. And I spoke about this at length, but it's not the topic we're discussing today. My understanding of the Magen Avraham fundamentally would be either according to Rebbe Kiva Eger. Rebbe Kiva Eger and Siman Yud points out there is a difference between Tumas HaMaisis and Shchita on one hand and Tzitzis on the other. By Tumas HaMaisis and Shchita, the Sibba Mechayeves always comes after the mitzvah and not before. Because I want to eat Peres Etzesol and I need to be mafresh. But when I am mafresh Tumas HaMaisis, it is before eating Peres Etzesol. So we cannot define this as a chiyuv gamor. You always do shchita before eating meat. So when you do shchita, it's difficult to define it as a chiyuv. I'm not eating meat yet. But the mitzvah of tzitzis is when you are already wearing dalat kanfis. So by now, when you're makayim the mitzvah of tzitzis, you have a chiyuv of tzitzis because you're wearing dalat kanfis. And that is why mitzvahs birchas at tzitzis is ba'amid. That is based on Rabbi Kiva Eger's understanding in Siman Yud. On the other hand, I wrote ba'arichas gedoyla about Afroshes Tumas Amaisis, huge Machloikes Taz, Yoredei Seven Aleph, Siv Kotten, Yud Zayin, Mogen Avrom, Ches Beis, Rabbi Kiva Eger, and Yoredei quotes the Mogen Avrom against the Taz. Turezov says, person is Chayiv Tumas Amaisis and Chali, even though he has no intention of eating Peres Etz Yisrael, still is Chayiv Afroshes Tumas Amaisis. Mogen Avrom and Rabbi Kiva Eger say no. It is only if you want to eat Peres that you're Chayiv Ba'afrosha. So this is a huge discussion which I don't want to get into today. But there's room to argue. Afroshes Tumas Amaisis in a way is similar to Shchita. It's a matir. If you eat meat without Shchita, it's not only Bitul Mitzvah Shchita, it's an Issa Nevela. If you eat bread without Afroshes Chala, or Peres Etzesur without Afroshes Tumas Amaisis, it's not only a Bitul Mitzvah Sasei, it's an Isur Tevel. But wearing dalat kanfis without tzitzis is no lav. There is no isser. It is only a bitul mitzvah say. And therefore tzitzis cannot be defined as a matio. It's a mitzvah. And that is why birchas at tzitzis ba'amida, while a froshes tumas amaisis and shchita could be yeshiva. Coming back to our question, is this halacha be'inid daritcha and Shinan, unique to tzitzis, or would it apply to other misses as well? Mishnah Berurah Kuf Chof Ches Siv Daled. Sheikh Hanoch says if a kohen doesn't want to be Oile Leduchin, he needs to leave the shul and be outside when the Shliach Tzibur says Ritzei. Because it is when the Shliach Tzibur starts Birchas Ha'avoida and he says Ritzei that the kohenim oikren ragleim, he's not in shul, then he's potur. So the Mishnah Berurah says it is only if the kohen is weak, if he's ill, if he doesn't feel well. But if he leaves the shul just without any justified reason, be'idne deritcha, he is nenash. It's just like not wearing dalet kanfis. So we learn from the Mishnah Berurah, this halacha is not unique to tzitzis. Any mitzvah which is similar to tzitzis, you don't have an aveda. If the kohen is not in shul, when we say that he's not mechuyev, but he still would be nenash be'idna deritcha. The Mishnah Berurah quotes another Gemara to prove the same point, and that's in Kedushin Lamed Gimel, dealing with the mitzvah of hadartu pnei zokon. You need to stand up and rise when a Talmid Chacham enters the room. The Gemara says, Yochel Yatza Meinov. Person will close his eyes and he say, I didn't see, I didn't know. Talmid loy mevi yoreisem elokecha. So what we learn from this Gemara is, potentially you could close your eyes, and you're not over aveda, because if you don't see, you don't have to stand up. But still, v'yoreisem elokecha. Sorechiyun. That's a Issa Gomer. That's a Issa Gomer to close your eyes. So why is it different than not wearing dalat kanfis? Not wearing dalat kanfis is only be'idne deritcha. The Shoel HaMeishav, the great Shoel HaMeishav, asks another question from Brochas Lamedei. Boyorei, ma ben Doris HaRishonim le Doris HaAchronim. Doris HaRishonim were mechabe v'sa mitzvahs. V'hoyu machnisim peroseim derech shar kedei lachayvon b'maisvahs. Doris HaAchronim machnisim peroseim derech gagos chatzeres v'kafifen kedei lepotron men ha'maisvahs. So this Gemara seems to say it's not an Aveira. It's not an Aveira to try to find a way out of the mitzvah of Rosh Hashanah. It's not a mitzvah chasidus. It's not the right thing to do. But it's not an Aveda. So why closing your eyes would be an Aveda? To me, the answer is very simple. When you close your eyes, you don't want to see the Talmid Chacham coming in. Okay, so you're potem and a mitzvah you didn't see. But what is the result? What is the result? The result is an Aveda. Even though you could wash your hands and say, Aniyas nafshi hitzalti. But you're not standing up for a Talmid Chacham, and that is a bezoin of Kavod HaTorah. It's different than a kohen that's not in the shul. A person is not wearing dalat kanfis. I don't have the mitzvah of tzitzis. I don't have the mitzvah of berchas kohenim. If the Peiros came into the Chotzer, Derech Gages, Chatzerim, V'Kafifas, I don't have the mitzvah of Maislis. But after all, you are seated, and people see that you are seated when a Talmud Chacham comes in. So the result is a result of Avera, even though, okay, you came out on the safe side, I didn't see. That's an Avera, and that is what we learn from V'yareisum Elokecho. It is different than the three other examples. Tzitzis, Berches Koyanim, and Afroshes Tumas Amaisis. That would be my understanding. Anyway, coming back to our sugya. So we learn from the Mishnah Berurah that this rule applies not only to tzitzis, Berches Koyanim as well. Anytime a person circumvents a chiyuv, if I don't put on dalat kanfis, I don't have a chiyuv. I wasn't in shul when they said it say, so I'm not chayav lalish l'dichen. Be'idne deritche, you need to worry. But I think that is only b'mitzvahs Shem, essentially avodas Hashem, like Berches Koyanim, like tzitzis. But in many mitzvahs that are all about the result, it's a medrash in Parshas Chukas. Bakei sholem v'rodfeha. A person needs to be roidef achrei hasholem. He does not need to be roidef achar other mitzvahs. So a person doesn't have to roam the hills and the mountains and the forests looking for sholuach again. Doesn't have to roam the hills looking for Avedas to give them back to their proper owner. Most of the mitzvahs, if you happen to be there, you happen to see, you have a mitzvah. If you're not around, you don't have a mitzvah. Peace is different. Rodfeha. What we learn from this medrash is, it is only mitzvah tzitzis that there's a pay that put on dalat kanfis, you should be able to wear tzitzis. So one of the arguments, I think, is, it all depends on darkoi shaloilam. If a kohen is in shul, and he stays in shul, naturally, he would have a mitzvah of Berches Koyanim. If he leaves the shul, it's obvious. He just wants to get out of the mitzvah. If everybody wears tzitzis and you don't, that is mezalzel b'mitzvahs, like I quoted the Tosfos in Shabbos and Neirach. But you don't need to roam the hills looking for a Ken Tzipor. That's far beyond what you're mechuyev. But maybe there's an additional difference in the essence of the mitzvah. Regarding avodas Hashem, a person needs to be proactive. Like Moshe Rabbeinu, he wanted to be mekayim the mitzvahs atluyas ba'oretz. So there are mitzvahs in which you need to strive. Chacham, leiv, yikach mitzvahs. The Pana Me'iros, Chelek Aleph Simachavav, disagrees with Tosfos and Menachos. And the Pana Me'iros argues, when the Gemara says a mitzvah to say we're nanish only in a moment of wrath, be'idne deritche, it is not only similar to tzitzis. If I don't wear dalat kanfis, I don't have a chiyuv. Even those mitzvahs to say that you do have a chiyuv, you're not punished elo be'idne deritche. And the first time I saw this Pana Me'iros, I was taken aback. Ein lechu teime gedoyle mizu. Crime and punishment are two sides of the same coin. Ein chet beli oynesh. How could it be a person has an avera and he will not be punished? One of the Yud Gimel Ikram, Ani Mamin B'Muni Shalem HaKadosh Baruch Hu Goyim Atev L'Shoym Mitzvaysu V'Manish L'Oiver Mitzvaysav. Manish L'Oiver Mitzvaysav. If you have an avera, you're Mavat Mitzvah say, how would we understand that there is no punishment, only Be'idne Deritcha? I Efsha L'Chet B'Li Oynish. However, the Pana Me'iros doesn't bring it. But I have a riot to the Pana Me'iros from the Ramban and the Ritva. How could that be? The Ramban in the beginning of Shar Gimel writes, Bitul Torah is only a mitzvah say, and therefore there is no punishment, only be'idne deritcha. Seems to be a pella. Talmud Torah keneged kulam. Im roya odem sheyasurim bo amora v'yafashbish b'masav pishbish v'loy motzo yitle be'bitul Torah. Doesn't this make it very clear that Bitul Torah does have an einish? Kamera choike madvorim to say that the Gemara says Yitle bebitul Torah beidna deritcha. So the Ramban says bitul Torah is a bitul mitzvah to say we're not nanish only beidna deritcha. And then there's the rit for Rosh Hashanah Tet Zayin. Kol shona she'ein toikin b'tchilo semarion b'soifa. If they didn't blow the shofar in Rosh Hashanah, it's going to be a bad year. The Ritva explains it's not because they have an aveira of bitul mitzvah shofar. That is only punishable be'idne deritcha. What the Gemara means to say is, we lost out the sgula of shofar. B'shosha kodesh b'uch oile b'bdin hu oile. B'shosha b'nei yisrael noitlen shafrasem b'yodein v'toikem HaKodesh Baruch Hu oile mekisei din v'yoshval kisei rachamim. There's no greater zgula than shofar. Nothing brings forth midas harachma more than shofar. And that is why the Gemara says if they didn't blow shofar Rosh Hashanah, we could expect a bad year. Not because of the aveira of bitul mitzvah shofar. That is a mitzvah to say. So we see from the Ritva as well. Even bitul mitzvah shofar. It's nothing to do with tzitzis where you're not wearing down at canvas. Bitul mitzvah shofar, they will not be punished. They'll be in the deritcha. So once again, this is a pella. How could there be a chait without an oynish? Reishis Chachma seems to say the same. Sharayira Perik Tezvav. The Reishis Chachma was one of the greatest Balei Kabbalah 500 years ago. The Reishis Chachma doesn't compare to the Ritva and the Ramban, but it's still an extremely important and significant source. Lemarba hapele. I want to suggest two different drachim. Ikar derech beis, like always. So my first argument would be, maybe when the Gemara says, a mitzvah say eina noshem ela beidne deritcha, it means eina noshem biyolam hazeh. Ultimately, ba'olam hanashomes, there's a price for every aveira. There's no such thing a person has an aveira, and he won't pay the price. Ein ched b'li yoinish, kishe'em she'em Yisurim b'liyavin. However, ba'olam hazeh, we're not nenash elo be'idna deritcha. We find a similar thought in Chacham Tzvisim and Memtes regarding Shabbos Peites. Till a person is 20 years old, there is no oynish b'dei shamayim. And the same question arises there, but he's a bar chiyuv. How come he won't be nenash? Says the Chacham Tzvi b'yolam hazeh. It's very hard to accept the Chacham Tzvi. It doesn't fit in with the basic Gemara Shabbos Peites. The story there is that Liyosed lo v'HaKodesh Baruch Hu asked, Tel Yitzchak Avinu choto b'necho. And Yitzchak makes a cheshbon with HaKodesh Baruch Hu. Yemei she'nesein in Shem Shona. First 20 years there is no punishment. Then we're 50. At the end of the argument, Yitzchak says, Pal galai, pal galach, lecha oira. And that Gemara, we're not dealing with oynish shemayim ba'olam hazeh, but oynish shemayim generally in the heavens. But maybe this would be a way to be miyash of the Rishonim that say even an aveira gemura, bitul mitzvah say we're only punished be'idne deritcha. So maybe the Gemara means we're only punished b'yolam hazeh. Ein nereli, stimas advorim. So what I want to say is a chiddush, not to me, but to many others. What does the Gemara mean that al tzitzis were nenash be'idna deritcha? If you did the aveira be'idna deritcha, or you will be punished be'idna deritcha. L'ch'oire, I think most of the Echorim understood, if you happened to take off your tzitzis be'idna deritcha, you're in trouble. But if it was not in the deritcha when you took off your tzitzis, you're safe. You won't be nanish, only be in the deritcha. Nimtza shura sadin loika. Two people did exactly the same. One had a mazel bish when he took off his tzitzis, it was a idne deritcha. The other happened to be lucky. When he took off his tzitzis, it was not a moment of wrath. Nimtza shura sadin loika. HaKodesh Baruch Hu dayin emes v'shoifet tzedek. Two people did exactly the same. Why? Number one will be salvaged. Number two will be punished. It's not right. Therefore, my argument is, Idne Deritche doesn't depend on Shas or Aveira. Depends on Shas or Einish. You didn't wear tzitzis. It's not an Aveira Gemura. But when it will be a Idne Deritche, a moment of anger in the heavens, you will pay the price. So everyone will pay the same price. Im lo hayom machar, im lo machar mechortayim. Time will come when Midas Adin will be Nesoirer, be'idne deretche, you're going to be punished, and therefore try to do tshuva as soon as you can to save yourself from that idne deretche. And that is my derech to be miyashav. Ramban, Ritva, Reishes Chochba Pona Me'irois. How could it be a person who was mevatla mitzvah and over avera, and he won't be punished? He will be punished. Not right now, but a moment will come sooner or later, idne deritche, and then he will be punished. And therefore, he should do tshuva as soon as he can. Years ago, I was asked a question, and I was very moved by a young soldier in the IDF, a young tzaddik. He was in one of the elite units, one of the Sayarot, the equivalent to the Navy SEALs in America, or the Rangers, or whatever they are. And he was required with his friends to run 10 kilometers in middle of an Israeli Khamsin. They took along tons of water to prevent dehydration, which is mortal danger. But he needed to run on a hot summer day 10 kilometers, part of his basic training. And he asked me, could he take off his tzitzis? I hugged that boy, and I was so moved. What a tzaddik, Mikam Yisrael, running 10 kilometers in intense heat, and he asked, could I take off my tzitzis? So by basic halachic definition, they said, of course you can. After all, Kuf Chov Chesiv Dalet, Kohen Sheine Roitzel Alois Leduchan. He should leave the shul before the Shliach Tzibah says Ritzei. The Mishnah Berurah says that is exactly the same as not wearing Dalet Kanfas. And the Mishnah Berurah explains, a Kohen cannot just leave the shul because he doesn't want to be Yoder Leduchan. That's an Aveda, that's not right. We're dealing with a Kohen that's cholosh. He's weak, he's tired, maybe he's a bit sick, and therefore he has a good reason not to be Yoder Leduchan. Kal v'chomer, if you need to run 10 kilometers in intense heat, every additional ounce that you're wearing is torture. So I told that young soldier, you could take your tzitzis off, but if you don't, all the malachim, Malachi Elyon, will be nespoil. And that all say to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Mika Amchi Yisrael, Ashreichem Yisrael Shatem Achabevim Es HaMitzvos. If you choose to do that run with tzitzis, I'm mekana you. Ashrecho va'ashrei chelkach. Mika Amchi Yisrael. So today we've discussed a very fascinating sugya, and I didn't see me min achronim should bring all these sources together and try to make seder and define definitions and be magdalek doris in the sugya of idna deritcha. Just a short thought about mitzvahs tzitzis. So there are two mitzvahs that we wear: tefillin shalosh, tefillin shel yad, and tzitzis. Which of the two is more important? Obviously tzitzis. Halacha mefareshes simachov ein shechan ochar achaim. Yisata betzitzis ve'achar kech yuniach tefillin. And the Bisesef explains, why does tzitzis come before tefillin? It's todia. Tzitzis is noik Shabbos and Yom Tov, while tefillin is not. It is also mikudish. Because regarding tzitzis, the Gemara says, Shkula mitzvah tzitzis keneged kol mitzvah shebetoira. We do not find the same regarding tefillin. So mitzvah tzitzis is a greater mitzvah than mitzvah tefillin. I have a comment. People spend hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars in having the most muhudadik tefillin, the batim, the parshiyos. Most people are mezalzel and mitzvot tzitzis. They wear a small talis kotan that doesn't have a shiur. There are so many details in a talis godel that people don't even care about, they don't know about. That's a mistake. Mitzvot tzitzis is as important, more important than mitzvot tefillin. Halavai, we should be makbed on mitzvot tzitzis, fraction of what we invest in mitzvot tefillin. Tzitzis gedolim and tefillin. So why is it that tefillin is a chiyuv and tzitzis is not a chiyuv? Tzitzis depends on your free will. If you don't wear dalat kanfis, you're not chayav in tzitzis. And my answer is, for the very same reason. Tefillin is majesty. Tefillin is a crown. Tefillin is royalty. Oval b'yom rishon potem al tefillin. Why? Because tefillin is pe'er, is beauty. Pe'er chochovesh olecho, that's tefillin. And avelis is eifel. Eifel and pe'er don't go together. So tefillin is pe'er. V'rokol amei oretz, ki shemeshem nikro olecho v'yoro mimeko. It's tefillin sheberosh. The goyim see our tefillin, and they're deterred. What is tzitzis? Tzitzis is not majesty. Tzitzis is avdus. Menoches mem gimel amid beis choisem shel tit. And Tosfos explains, what is choisem shel tit? It is a symbol of avdus, of slavery. HaKadosh Baruch Hu imposes majesty. He doesn't impose slavery. HaKadosh Baruch Hu imposes on us. I want you to know, Kol Yisrael b'nei Malachim, you are my people. Rise and stand tall and high. You are the Am HaNivchar. Pe'echo chovesh olecho. Avdus, Kadosh Baruch Hu doesn't want to impose on us. He wants us to choose Avdus. I explained many times, the highest medrega a Jew could ever achieve is Simchas Avdus. Brings you all the way back to Har Sinai. It is only once in history that an entire people chose to serve, chose slavery, service. And that is when we were Magdim Nasa Lenishma. Beautiful story I heard many years ago from the Lev Simcha, from the Gerer Rebbe. He heard the story from his great father, the Imre Emes. It transpired once in Sukkot. The Sfas Emes said, when we say Ono Hashem, we could achieve the greatest heights. And the Imre Emes told his children, there was an argument between Zikna Hasidim. Which Ono Hashem did he mean? Ono Hashem Eshiyano, Ono Hashem Etzlichano. So the other day in the morning Sukkot, when they said Hallel, 50% of the Olim shouted at the top of their lungs, Ono Hashem Eshiyano, and all the rest by Ono Hashem Etzlichano. The Imre Emes, the great son of this Sfas Emes, ultimately the great Gerer Rebbe said, but I fully understood he meant neither Ono Hashem Ashiono nor Ono Hashem Atzlichano, but rather Ono Hashem Ken Yavdecho and Yavdecho Ben Amasecho. This is a story I heard. Let me share with you my interpretation of the story. Ono Hashem Ashiono, Ono Hashem Atzlichano is Aleph Nun Aleph. Ono Hashem Ken Yavdecho is Aleph Nun Hey. You pronounce it the same, but it's a different word. And the Radak, Reb David Kimchi, the great Daktikan, explains, Ono with an Aleph is a plea. It's a bakosha, please. Please, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, help us, save us, salvage us, Oshiono, Hatzlichono. Ono Hashem with the Hey is an expression of gratitude. Thank you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Thank you for what? Ken Yavdechu. You accept us as slaves, and you let us serve. Amazing. Amazing. It is only twice in the entire Mishnah Torah that the Rambam uses the expression of Simcha Yisera. At the end of Hilchos Lulav, Afal pi shekol hamoed mitzvah l'smoyach b'hem b'yamei hachag ois shom Simcha Yisera. Where's the other source? Perek Gimel Hilchos Chanukah. Ein oimer halal b'Rosh Hashanah v'yom Kippurim. Lefi she'ein elu yomim shel Simcha Yisera, elo yomim shel yiro v'fachad. So come to think of it, Sfas Emes stands Sukkos, and he says, when you say Onu Hashem and Hallel, Simcha Yesera B'Kiflayim, double Simcha Yesera. Simcha Yesera of Hallel, Simcha Yesera of Sukkos. And what are we so happy about? Thank you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ki Ani Avdecha. Simchas U'Avdus. We feel privileged to be Avdei Hashem, to be slaves and servants of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that is so great. It should be no wonder that the Sfas Emes says, V'mezoktonu Hashem kemen poilen de greste Sachen. That is the Madrega of Moshe Rabbeinu. In the entire Torah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu calls Moshe Avdi, Eved Hashem. V'yom Hashem Moshe Eved Hashem, Lo ken Avdi Moshe. Madua lo yoresim ledaber ba'avdi Moshe. Lo ken Avdi Moshe b'chol beis yinemenu. Tmunas Hashem yabit. Why is Moshe defined as an Eved and not as a son? Why? The answer is in the Tefillah of Shabbos morning. Yismach Moshe b'matnas chelkoi ki Eved nemon koros uloi. Moshe Rabbeinu was so enriched and happy and grateful to be an Eved. So it's no wonder to me that the Sfas Emes said, Sukkos of the morning by Hallel, when you say, Onu Hashem ki ani avdecha, you could achieve the greatest heights. And that is why tzitzis is not imposed on us. If you don't want to wear dalat kafis, you don't need to wear tzitzis. Kadosh Baruch Hu expects us to choose tzitzis, to choose avdus, out of free will, out of love, out of simcha. So, tefillin is majesty. Yes, Kadosh Baruch Hu imposes royalty on Klal Yisrael. Avdus is something he wishes we choose out of simcha, ahava, out of free will. We should always be zeicher to be Avdei Hashem mitoch simcha va'ahava. We should be zeicher to be mekabel ol malchus shamayim ba'ahava. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu should accept us. V'yismach Hashem b'masav. We should be zeicher b'korov to Yeshua's Yisrael, be as Goel Tzedek, b'mheru v'yomeinu amen. Have a wonderful day.